Was British colonialism good for the colonies? Every now and then, the British royal family is welcomed to Pakistan with pomp and pride despite the now well-known violence and exploitation wrought by colonialism. And yet, many in the subcontinent believe that British rule came with its benefits, most often citing railways, education, and democracy. History, however, shows that even these so-called benefits were byproducts of exploitation. Take, for example, the railways. The maps of the railways in the subcontinent illustrate that all railway lines connected industrial areas to coastal areas. The truth is, for the longest time, railways were used to transport goods, not passengers. And by the time trains began carrying passengers, it was almost exclusively British ones. Between 1765 and 1938, over the course of almost 2 centuries, the British extracted $45 trillion worth of goods from South Asia. The colonial power imposed a tax on the population of the subcontinent and used the wealth collected through these taxes to purchase goods created by those very people. Not only did they essentially purchase these goods for free, they also sold these goods to other countries for extraordinary profits. This theft left the subcontinent criminally depleted, and its most terrible consequence came in the form of 2 famines across Bengal, one in 1770, in which 10 million people died, and the other in 1943, in which 3 million people lost their lives. Historians agree that this famine was man-made, a direct result of colonial policies. It is this very extraction and exploitation of the colonies that made Britain's Industrial Revolution possible and established it as a developed country. Conversely, it depleted the resources of the colonies and contributed to their underdevelopment, a process that has consequences that we can see to this day. Because of this, many historians and activists have made a case for reparations, the argument being that since the development and wealth of many first world countries, such as England, came at the expense of the forceful and violent underdevelopment of the ex-colonies, economic reparations are due to third world countries in the interest of accountability for colonial crimes, the alleviation of inequality and poverty, and the development of better and equal relations between the nation-states of the world. As for the English education system, its initial purpose was to create bureaucratic workers so that the British could more effectively govern the general public via a class of middlemen more familiar to the colonized population. Moreover, social and economic development depended on how well acquainted one was with the British system. But since not everyone had access to education, only a few people could benefit from it. Thomas Mcauley, a famous British politician, advised his government in 1835 that there was no need to invest in Sanskrit and Arabic education in India. He famously wrote, "A single shelf of a good European library was worth the whole native literature of India and Arabia." The purpose of this education was to create well-oiled civil servants for colonial rule, not critical and free thinkers. At last we come to democracy, which before the departure of the British was an almost non-existent reality for the people of the subcontinent who were treated as British subjects and not citizens with any semblance of rights. When the first general elections were held in India in 1920, only 3% of the population had the right to vote. After the passage of the Government of India Act, only 30 million people were eligible to vote in the population of 350 million. That is, even in the best case, more than 90% of India's population was deprived of the right to vote. Colonized nations had to fight for their right to self-determination and only achieved it through a long struggle and the sacrifice of thousands. The British did not simply bestow democracy upon the subcontinent. The people of the subcontinent had to fight for it. Even in today's democracy, the project of decolonization is far from over. We must ask ourselves, how do we identify and respond to neo-colonial and neo-imperialist powers today? What is the impact of retaining colonial institutions in a free and democratic society? Though it is important for injustice and oppression to be acknowledged, revisiting this history also teaches us about our present. It reminds us to be critical of power and the purposes our institutions serve.